for the better part of like 3 months now, it's been a constant churning of James Harden's unhappy with the Philadelphia 76ers organization, and James Harden wants to go to the Clippers, and it's just been a constant cycle of James Harden news with no traction until yesterday when James Harden finally gets traded to the Los Angeles Clippers. He also goes with PJ Tucker, Philip Petrovich. I don't know who that is. I apologize. I'm sure I messed your name up. And the Philadelphia 76ers get Robert Covington, Nicholas Batum, Marcus Morris, Kenyon Martin Jr. They get a first-round pick, 2 second rounds, and a pick swap. So for a trade like this, how people want to look at it, the simplest way to look at it is winners and losers. That is how everyone usually looks at trades. And I think that's the easiest way to look at trades. But when we talk about a trade like this, it is so layered and so complex that you can't just look at it as a winners and losers. You have to look at it for what it is, and that is the trade. So what we're going to do is I'm going to talk about the Philadelphia 76ers side of this, and I'm going to talk about the LA Clippers side of this, because both teams are looking at this as, I guess, quote unquote wins, but both teams are also looking at this in two different perspectives. And let's start with the big side, or the side that got the quote unquote big star, and that is the Clippers getting James Harden. The name James Harden is bigger and more important right now than the player James Harden. The name James Harden still reverberates around the NBA as one of the best players in basketball. But that's not who James Harden is currently at this moment. James Harden was upset last year that he didn't make an all-star team. And to his credit, James Harden did finish the season number 1 in assists. But the James Harden that we remember, the thoughts that come to mind when you think of James Harden, that is not who he is. James Harden isn't the person that can go give you 40, that can go give you 60, that can get you a 50-point triple-double on any given night. That's not the James Harden that we've seen for a minute now. And I've said this time and time again. That is the James Harden that the Philadelphia 76ers needed. They didn't need the James Harden to lead the league in assists. They needed the James Harden that can give you instant offense as quickly as anyone we've ever seen. The James Harden that the Clippers are getting is the same James Harden we've seen over probably the last 4 years. And that is a slowed down version of James Harden. He's still uberly effective in some games. Not as consistent as he used to be for the Houston Rockets, but in some games, he's able to be uberly consistent. He can give you maybe a 40 on a random night, as we saw in the playoffs against the Celtics. But as we also saw, he can also fall off the mat. When a star gets traded to a team, usually a team has to give up a lot. Usually a team has to give up so much because it's very difficult to let go of a star, because that usually means the franchise is hitting a reset, or the franchise is going in a completely different direction. We saw that with Damian Lillard. The initial trade wasn't a lot, but when you look at the team today, Portland got a whole hell of a lot from that Damian Lillard trade, because at the end of the day, you're pivoting. You're going off of Damian Lillard to a hopefully new star in Scoot Henderson. This trade has been a little different because the star in this trade, or the star for the 76ers, let me say, was Joel Embiid, who's still there. We're going to talk about the Philadelphia side in a second, but I brought that point up to say the Clippers didn't have to give a lot. I also talked about this when we talked about the Damian Lillard trade and how I felt that even though I understood where Damian Lillard was coming from, he did operate in bad business practices. You signed a contract, and I understand if you want out. Trust me, I get it. I understand that you want out after you sign a contract. That's a little shady, but I get it because at the end of the day, you're your own entity. You're your own business. So you need to do what's best for you. But what I don't respect and what I don't like is you signing the contract and then demanding a trade to one team. That really pigeonholes not only the team that you're currently on, but the team that you want to go to. Because the team that you want to go to, it's kind of like a cheat code for them, because it's like not only are we ultimately trying to get that star, but we don't have to give you a lot because the star has already come out and said that he wants to be here. He doesn't want to be anywhere else. Now, ultimately, yes, Damian Lillard didn't end up in Miami, but that's why Miami was able to lowball the Milwaukee Bucks as long as they did, because that's the only destination that Damian Lillard said he wanted to go to. When we talk about this James Harden and Clippers deal, James Harden, the Clippers were the only team James Harden wanted to go to. And instead of giving up a Terrence Mann that the Philadelphia 76ers originally wanted and multiple draft picks or multiple first-round picks, a package that a name like James Harden would garner, you get Robert Covington, who's a good player, but he's not on the stature of James Harden, the name James Harden. Nicholas Batum, Marcus Morris, Kenyon Martin Jr., and one first-round pick, 2 second-round picks, and a pick swap. You don't have to give a lot, and you still get James Harden. Now, do I think James Harden is still at an all-star level? No. I don't. Maybe an all-star, but maybe that. I don't think he is on. He should be considered a top-tier player in the league anymore. I don't think we've seen that for the last 4 years. I don't think that we can. Yes, James Harden, again, led the league in assists last year, but last year was a shell of what he used to look like in Houston. So for people that are commenting, because I know last episode I talked about James Harden, and I said that his career it seems like his career could possibly come to an end soon. This trade doesn't do anything for me as far as change my mind. And the reason for that is because I do think that even with this move, James Harden's career is extremely fragile right now. This is the fourth team in a row. The fourth team in a row in 4 years that he has forced his way out of. And like the great Kevin Garnett said, you can only zig for so long before it's done. And I don't think that James Harden, skill-wise, is at the point where you can continue to force your way out of situations like this. Again, this is the fourth time this has happened in 4 years. Now, I'm not going to sit here and talk about the relationship with Daryl Morey. I'm not going to sit here and say that James Harden was either justified or not justified. What I'm talking about is what is now. And what is now is James Harden has a Clippers jersey on his back. How is this going to fit? That's another question that always needs to be answered when you have a star player or a player with the star name like James Harden goes to your team that already has a player like Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and Russell Westbrook. The person that this affects the most is Russell Westbrook. And Russell Westbrook is the reason why I am weary and I am hesitant to crown this a successful trade. Because quiet as it's kept, Russell Westbrook has been playing great this year. He's been playing great actually ever since he's been on the Clippers. This year, I think he's shooting, I know it's early, but I think he's shooting close to a career high in three-point percentage. He's shooting close to a career high in field goal percentage. Russell Westbrook has played well, very well for the Clippers as the third option. And we've talked about this before. Your mindset has to change when you go from the first option to the second option to the third option. Now, Russell Westbrook more than likely is the fourth option. And we've seen this story before. We've seen James Harden and Russell Westbrook play together and how disjointed it looked. Well, now you're adding on Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. I think Stephen A. Smith said it. Wow, Stephen A. Smith said it, and it's absolutely right. That ironically, this move works better with an injury. And I don't wish an injury upon anyone. I don't want anyone hurt. But this move works better with three people instead of two. Like, this move works better if Paul George gets hurt. So now you have Kawhi Leonard, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden. Or if Kawhi Leonard goes out, now you have Paul George, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden. Of course, I don't wish injury upon anyone, but it's very hard for me to see. Now, I could be wrong because, again, I was slightly, I'm not going to say slightly wrong, but I needed to see what Kevin Durant looked like with the Golden State Warriors. And obviously, that was one of the greatest teams in NBA history. Now, I didn't think it wasn't going to work, but I just needed to see how it was going to work. A ball-dominant player like Kevin Durant, a ball-dominant player like Steph Curry. But what it did do is it took sacrifice. This is going to take sacrifice. And I don't know, and we talked about this last episode with Anthony Davis, I don't know if Russell Westbrook understands the sacrifice, if James Harden understands the sacrifices that needs to be made to make this thing work. James Harden can't be on the ball. He has to turn himself into an off-ball player. Something that he hasn't been since his, in fact, something he's never been, because even when he played with Russell Westbrook in OKC, he was the third or sixth man. So he would come in and orchestrate the second team. Sacrifice is the name of the game, is the topic bar for this trade when we talk about the Clipper side. Sacrifice. Is James Harden willing to sacrifice being on the ball as much as he's used to? Which, as we saw with the Philadelphia 76ers, it didn't work that well. It worked better than I thought, but it didn't work that well. Is Russell Westbrook able to sacrifice because he is the de facto point guard? Now you're going to have to share reps, share point guard assignments with James Harden. And on top of that, and the reason why I keep talking about those two, because I don't expect Paul George to have to sacrifice. I don't expect Kawhi Leonard to have to sacrifice at this point, because those two are the better players out of all four. The issue is obviously injuries. And that's another thing. Not as much as injuries, but the status of the Clippers after this trade. I understand that if you have an opportunity to get someone like the name James Harden, and I keep saying, let's put a PS in that. I keep saying the name because, again, the James Harden that we think of is not the James Harden that we've seen the last few years. This isn't a prolific scoring James Harden. This isn't you look up and, oh, damn, James Harden got 60-point triple-double. This isn't him anymore. This is a lesser version of James Harden. I still think he's a very good player, but he is not nowhere close to the prime James Harden. He's closer to the end of his career than the beginning. I'll just say that. And I don't wish, I want everyone to play as long as they want. But when we talk about injuries, when we talk about just the wear and tear on the body, when we talk about the fact of his superpowers that he has diminished. Meaning, Steph Curry's superpower obviously is shooting threes. His superpower is also player movement. He moves without the ball better than pretty much everyone in the league. On top of that, he is the greatest shooter we've ever seen. Neither one of those powers for Steph Curry is going down, is decreasing. Right now, Giannis's superpower is just his brute force and his physicality and his ability to finish around the rim. That's not diminishing anytime soon. James Harden's superpower was, of course, being able to manipulate the refs to draw fouls, as well as his first step was one of the quickest first steps we've seen in the league, and his step back. His step back and the way that he was able to create space was unlike any player in the league. Well, due to just him physically slowing down, those aren't, he may get a step back here and there, but it's definitely not creating as much space as it used to. And he's obviously not as quick as he used to. He has a tough time breaking down defenders, or he has a tough time creating space because he just doesn't have that anymore. So let me get back to this. Let me get back to the Clippers. I understand why you would trade for a player like James Harden. It goes back to you're at the park. You're at the park and you're trying to build the best team possible. I get that. And people get upset with someone like a Kevin Durant for going to Golden State, or someone like Kevin Durant for going to the Phoenix Suns, or someone like Damian Lillard for ultimately getting traded to the Bucks. And they think, where's the competitive spirit? But at the end of the day, when you're at the park, why would you want to play with bums? You know what I'm saying? So people get upset when you build teams like this. But I understand why. If you're a team, you want to get the best players possible. And especially while it seems like a lot, just the sheer amount that the Clippers gave away, as far as 4 players and 4 picks, that seems like a lot. But when you look at the players and how impactful or not as impactful as they were to the Clippers, you didn't really give up much for James Harden. So I understand why you would do this. But I also understand that this reeks of desperation from the Clippers. Because the headline is you have Russell Westbrook and James Harden and Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. You were able to keep Terrence Mann. That's the headline. The headline is the new super team. But what they're not telling you, or not gonna say not telling you, let me. What isn't headlined is all 4 of those players are free agents after this season. So at the end of this year, all of those players are free agents. And what do you think the likelihood that all 4 of them get a contract to remain with the Clippers? Now, I could obviously be wrong, but I think it's very naive to think that all 4 of them is going to remain the Clipper. In fact, I'm very naive into thinking that most of them are going to remain the Clipper. And that is where I said it reeks of desperation, because they're trying to do what the LA Rams did. They're trying to win now. They're trying to compile a team and win now, because this team is not going to look the same next year. And when you factor that in, it's a difficult trade and an interesting trade because you gave up so much. These players, Nicholas Batum, Robert Covington, Marcus, they could have been a lot cheaper and probably would have stayed. And honestly, not all of them were free agents. So you're giving a lot of your future for the now. And when you look at the landscape of the league, I don't know how much better James Harden makes the Clippers. I know the name sounds good. And again, if I'm wrong, I will definitely come in here and say that I'm wrong. I have no problem in doing that. We're going to talk about how I was wrong a little bit later in the show. But as of right now, I understand why the Clippers would do it, but I also understand that it reeks of desperation because do you realize how much they gave up to get a Russell Westbrook, to get a Paul George, to get Kawhi Leonard? Remember, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was on this team. The person that the person that landed on All-NBA first team last year, the same person that is a young star in this league, they gave up Paul George, or they gave up to get Paul George. They gave up so much to get Kawhi Leonard. They gave up a lot to get Russell Westbrook, a bunch of draft picks. They gave up a bunch of draft picks now to get Russ or James Harden, all of which are free agents at the end of this year. And another reason why I don't foresee most of them coming back is because they've been trying to trade. They've been trying to trade Paul George for a minute now. And we talk about Anthony Davis and his health issues. Kawhi Leonard has played less games. In fact, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George have played less games than Anthony Davis. Or I think maybe just Kawhi Leonard. But if you combine them, they played less games. I don't want to make it sound like I'm crapping on James Harden or James Harden's trash or this isn't going to work. If you just talk about the names and you talk about the collection of talent, the Clippers on paper, I have to always specify by saying on paper, the Clippers have one of, if not the best team in basketball, or at least the best collection of top tier talent in basketball. If we just talk about on paper. But injuries are never a factor on paper. Team chemistry is never a factor on paper. So I understand, again, why the Clippers would do this. But I don't know as we sit here today. Now, again, I could be wrong and things can be drastically different by the end of the season or even the trade deadline. But I don't see how this James Harden deal makes the Clippers that much better. Especially when you see as how much Russell Westbrook has to sacrifice now. Russell Westbrook, that's been playing great for this team. And on top of that, it for damn sure puts your future into question because your big four now are all free agents at the end of this season. And Lord forbid, let's say you don't win a championship. What incentives does any four of them have of staying? Which means that you would have went big game hunting and come back with nothing. In fact, come back worse than, and this is only if, of course, all four of them leave after this year, which is a very real possibility. Let's say that. And the very last thing I'm going to say about James Harden, the Clippers side is, again, I don't know how many times James Harden has to do this This is the fourth time. This is the fourth time that he has forced his way out of a seemingly perfect situation. This is the fourth time he's forced his way out of it. And shouts out to Stephen A. Smith. He said a stat that James Harden, Russell Westbrook, and Paul George are in the top 9 of all time in, I think, minutes played without a championship, or games played without a championship. Yeah. And let me talk about the Philadelphia 76ers side, because honestly, they're probably the happiest in this situation. They're the happiest because it not only clearly defines their team right now, or their team is clearly defined. Moving forward, you don't have the distraction of a disgruntled player, especially a player that is considered uber important for your team in James Harden. But it's a clear definition of, or it clearly defines your team, because now moving forward, you know that your number 2 option is Tyrese Maxey. And Tyrese Maxey has the ability to be one of the better young players. Actually, he is currently one of the better young players in basketball. He just now has the opportunity to display it a lot more than he did with James Harden. And on top of that, you don't have to worry about, he gets as much touches outside of course, Joel Embiid. He gets as much touches at the guard position as ever, because he has no competition for that guard spot. And I think that for the 76ers, it's kind of addition by subtraction. You gain a more confident, a more empowered, a more integral Tyrese Maxey, giving up someone like James Harden, who, again, I will give him credit, led the league in assists last year. And while, yes, I do think that it doesn't, I still don't think that when we talk about the grand scheme of the East, I don't think that the Philadelphia 76ers are anywhere close to being better than the Celtics when they're on their game, or the Milwaukee Bucks. But I do think that this team is now clearly defined. And you're essentially giving up a player that A, was unhappy, and B, is a free agent at the end of this year. And you got Robert Covington, who's a great 3-and-D player. You have Nicholas Batum. He can hit a shot. You have Marcus Morris. He can hit a shot. And you have Kenyon Martin Jr., who is a good young player with a bunch of picks. So I think that, I'm not going to say winners or losers, but I will say that the Philadelphia 76ers are probably happiest right now. Actually, a person that may not be the happiest is Joel Embiid. Because I think right now, when you look at it, it's like, God damn, we gave up James Harden for a bunch of scraps outside of Robert Covington. I think he's good, but a bunch of scraps. But I do think that towards the end of the year, hopefully we're all expecting Tyrese Maxey to take that elevator up as far as skill set. I think he's gonna be happy. But I know that I will say that if this doesn't work out, if the Philadelphia 76ers end up much worse than they are now, if Tyrese Maxey doesn't make that leap, I don't expect Joel Embiid to be, and I will say this, even if you can't make it out of the second round, or even to the second round, that's going to be an issue. And I don't know if Joel Embiid will stay around for that. Now, again, we're just talking about this trade. But there's always a red pill, blue pill situation with all trades. What if this happens? What if this happens? And I foresee this being a positive for the Philadelphia 76ers, but it can also be a negative if things don't, which I don't expect to happen, but if things don't matriculate into wins and better team chemistry and stuff like that, we'll see. We'll see. But as we sit here today, James Harden and PJ Tucker is now a LA Clipper, and Tyrese Maxey is the clear-cut, definitive second option for the Philadelphia 76ers. That also get a really good 3-and-D player in Robert Covington. So we'll have to see what happens. But I'm excited. I'm always excited, I'm always excited to see how these work, because again, this is, if you look at the landscape of the league, man, you got a superpower in Phoenix right now. You still got Golden State, and they're pretty old, but they're playing hell of basketball. And I know I said that their window is closed, but they've been playing really well. And Chris Paul looks a lot better than I thought he did, or I thought he would. You still have the Lakers, who have their up and downs. You still have Milwaukee and Denver. Nobody really talks about Denver because just how good they are. Denver is the clear-cut best team in basketball right now. And Nikola Jokic seems like he is the clear-cut best player in basketball. And it's I'm not going to say it's not close, because Giannis is still Giannis, but this is just interesting. A trade like this, especially for the Clippers, that usually gets talked or left out as far as the top echelon teams because of their health status that frequently changes with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. They're hoping that this puts them right in the fray of things, and I'm excited to see. And for this doesn't make, I don't think that this makes the Philadelphia 76ers much worse either. So, because they've proven that they can win without James Harden. So we'll see. But congratulations for James Harden for ultimately getting what he wanted, and not only getting out of Philly, but going to the one team that he wanted to go to was the Clippers. Oh, man, you stayed to the end of the video. I appreciate you. If you like what you saw, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss any content from your boy. You can also go back and watch past episodes, past clips, and don't forget that the Unpopular Podcast, new episodes drop every Wednesday and Saturday. Appreciate you.